Edwin Horace. You better know him as Ed. Because of how funny, strong, and kind-hearted he is, he's captured our hearts as fans of Ed, Edd and Eddy.
You bet your sweet bippy I did.
But I'm not here to talk about the sides of Ed that you remember. I'm here to talk about the sides of Ed that you know nothing about. And that's what I'll be showing you here, the other sides of Ed. Now, before I dive into Ed's lesser known sides, we have to establish the side of Ed that made him who he is. Ed is not the brightest bulb in the room. He essentially has the intelligence of buttered toast. And I kid you not, he literally has the intelligence of buttered toast. If you were to pair Ed in a section of typical dumb characters, he's right alongside Billy, Sheen, Patrick, and whoever else you want to name. He's really only there to make all of us laugh, but also make everyone else feel that much smarter.
Hurry, Ed, you almost got me!
But believe it or not, Ed is smarter than the show and all of us give him credit for. There are times where he shares bits and pieces of knowledge with his friends that sometimes goes over their heads. Like the time he hit Eddie with this pretty logical question.
How can my feet smell if they don't have a nose? Ed?
Or the time he questioned Eddie's poor decision making.
Oh, mine! Even I am not that dumb, Double D.
Now you can peg this as, oh, well, even a broken clock is right twice a day. But to hit this home even further, Ed's problem solving skills are absolutely genius. There are times when Double D and Eddie fail to come up with solutions to problems they come across. But then here comes Ed with an answer. In the episode Who's Minding the Ed, Rolf is in a hurry to get to his family reunion, so he gives Ed the responsibility of watching over his animals. In order to get the animals' attention, Ed comes up with this brilliant idea on the spot. Now you might be like, but Murray, why didn't Ed just take care of the animals on Rolf's farm? Well, you gotta think, Rolf was in a hurry, so he maybe didn't give Ed all that he needed to do his job on the farm. Maybe Ed doesn't know Rolf's farm quite as well as he does his own house. So this was absolutely a smart thing to do. Oh, and I can't forget to mention, Ed has great phonetic awareness.
Ectoplasm. E-C-T-O-P-L-A-S-M. Ectoplasm.
Now mind you, this moment was from the episode Too Smart for His Own Ed, in which Ed beat Double D in a spelling contest which made him the new brainiac of the school. It's also important to mention that Double D won every contest up until this point, so for Ed, this was a milestone.
Now, I could tell you about the time when Ed used Eddie's face to find a treasure map in the cul-de-sac. I could tell you about the time he literally went through a maze to find Chunky Puffs. But I think his problem-solving skills had the most impact here. In Ed, Edd and Eddy's season finale, The Big Picture Show, the Eds finally meet Eddie's older brother, who actually isn't all that he was hyped up to be. Despite all the cool stories Eddie had shared about his brother, he's actually a really crappy person. To stop the abuse that Eddie was getting from his brother, Ed makes a big brain move that completely changes the situation. Now, it's important to understand that if it wasn't for Ed's quick thinking skills, Eddie would not have been cheered the way that he was, and we wouldn't have gotten one of the most satisfying endings to a cartoon ever. Now, these examples are few and far between, but the episode that best shows Ed's intelligence as a whole is from the episode Hand Me Down Ed. In the episode, a boomerang randomly lands on the cul-de-sac, and anyone who grabs hold of it experiences changes to their personality. Eddie goes from a greedy, mean-spirited person to an affectionate and lovable human being. Double D goes from smart and reserved to,
Sin City was a savior.
I'll just leave it for your interpretation. But most important, of course, was that Ed went from being free-spirited and a little airheaded to what we see here.
A dissertation on unifying field theory and its effect on leptons and quasars.
Anytime I think of Ed being smart for a change, this is the episode that I think about constantly because it's the embodiment of what we expect of an intelligent person to say and do. We don't expect him to be well educated, but yet he shows intelligence and craftiness better than Double D and Eddie combined. But that's just the tip of the Edberg. Tip of the iceberg. The next side of Ed that you may not have known about is his more elegant side. When it comes to Ed's style and cadence, let's be real. The man dresses in the same clothes every episode outside of certain occasions. He cares very little about his hygiene. And when it comes to the ladies, how do the youngsters say? The man has zero riz. And before you say, but Murray, Ed managed to pull one of the Kanker sisters. That's exactly my point. Do me a favor, put an S in front of Kanker sisters and you'll get exactly what they are. Overall, Ed is just a really grimy human being. Fellas, don't be like Ed. Wear some deodorant, please. It even gets to a point where the dirtiness becomes too much for Eddie and Double D. In the episode Over Your Ed, Ed's bad hygiene and clumsiness becomes so severe that it completely destroys Eddie's scam that would have made him a decent fortune. Eddie and Double D work together to turn Ed into a cleaner and respectable person, essentially transforming him into a completely different character from before. This Ed has style, he's confident, and he's much more socially mature. When I look at things like the boldness, the swagger, this version of Ed is what I think a lot of people wish they could be. Now you might be asking yourself, why didn't the writers explore this side of Ed even further? Maybe even keep it as an alter ego for him. The simplest answer is, that's not who Ed is at heart. He's not known to be this clean, suave, and cheeky person. The only reason he was able to pull this persona off in the first place was because his friends helped him to do it. Trust me, Ed doesn't go around saying things like,
"Swiggity swag, what's in the bag?"
And if there's one thing that people don't like, it's someone who isn't who they claim to be. But that isn't to say that we can't change or self-improve parts of ourselves, but it has to come naturally and from a good place. At the end of the day, Pretty Boy Ed came into existence to work as a replacement for a failed scam that was caused by him. Eddie only invested in this version of Ed because he saw the dollar bills that could come from his popularity. I'm sure deep down there's a side to Ed that naturally is more clean and less obnoxious, but if it hasn't come already, it will come with time. Just like how emotional maturity comes with time. Speaking of which, the next side of Ed we will be looking at is his emotional side. Now I know the term emotional can mean so many different things, but in this case, this is what I mean.
Say it isn't so! Go back, little one!
Instead of a big smile, it's quivering lips. Instead of the sound of laughter, it's the sound of crying. This is a big deal because when it comes to Ed's feelings, we really don't associate him with having any negative ones. With that being said, we can't forget that Ed is human. He has feelings just like all of us. There are multiple instances in Ed and Eddie where Ed simply lets his emotions out. In the episode It Came From Outer Ed, Ed makes an attempt to create a scam by reimagining a story from one of his favorite comic books. Eddie obviously thinks this is ridiculous and calls Ed bluff, completely shutting down his idea because of his doubts. Now, for as ridiculous as it sounds, you gotta understand, Ed is a kid. His imagination is as big as any other 14-year-old boy in real life would be. When you were a kid, did you ever have an idea so big that you wanted to share with your friends or family but felt like nobody was listening? If so, then you know how heartbreaking it is to have your ideas shot down, no matter how outlandish or silly they may be. Now, of course, after some convincing, Eddie then opens up to Ed's crazy idea and we're off to the races. But Ed's level of emotion isn't felt any harder than in the big picture show. There's a part in the episode where Eddie and Double D get into a huge fight. Ed looks at all this in complete horror and just sits there crying. Up until this point, the Eds have never fought this intensely before, and seeing them fight almost to the point of breaking up was heavy to look at, even for myself. Even though we really don't find Ed to be this depressed, somber character, guys, what he was feeling is very much a part of life. Trust me, I love seeing Ed smile, laugh, and be his usual jovial self, but how realistic would it have been for him to just smile and laugh in the face of conflict? Life won't always be filled with sunshine and rainbows, but that's not a bad thing. If Ed and even all of us were to never feel sadness, those moments of laughter and joy wouldn't feel as great as they would. Ultimately, to be happy is to sometimes be sad. This side of Ed definitely hurt him more than it did his own friends. But there's a side to Ed that hurt everyone else far more. This side of Ed is shown in the episode Little Blue Ed. The episode starts how every typical Ed and Eddie episode usually starts. The Ed's creating some shady scam to get a quick buck from the kids of the cul-de-sac. Makeshift dinosaur, ghetto wrestling match, Edtropolis, which I'm not gonna lie, it was a pretty cool scam. This time around, the scam would be a low-budget movie starring yours truly. Now, as you would think, all the kids would find this to be a ripoff, so they take matters into their own hands.
You miss!
While the food fight is happening, it is suddenly stopped once they see him. Ed handles the whole cul-de-sac like they're his dirty laundry.
Away with you, unwanted pesterers!
Now at this point, nobody knows why Ed is angry. He showed up in a bad mood for no apparent reason. But if there's one person who has something to say about that, it's his little sister Sarah. Someone who can match his anger just as much.
You can't kick me out! I live here too!
Guys, this is an Ed that is far different from before. If this was the Ed of old, he would have just let Sarah bully him into a corner because she's Miss Goody Two-Shoes. But if I'm being honest, this felt pretty satisfying to see. I mean, let's be real, sooner or later, karma was going to come back to bite her. Little did she know, that bite would be from her own flesh and blood. After Ed lets off some steam, he just walks off. As good friends would do, Eddie and Double D tried to figure out why Ed is so angry. They go to the local park only to see him pouting on a tree stump. And I must say, the sight of Ed casually ripping a tree stump out of the ground is terrifying. Ed's bad mood doesn't sit well with Eddie, so he tries his hand to snap him out of it.
Out of it, you torment me!
He obviously fails. Double D then tries his hand, but instead of being aggressive, he takes a much more softer approach.
Touch me again and I will squash you!
Seeing all of this play out was honestly sad to see. Of all people, Ed threatens someone who may be more kind-hearted than him, let alone Double D is his best friend. This side of Ed is not only angry, he's also cold and heartless. Kind of makes you think, did we really know Ed like we thought we did? Ed's anger gets to a point where he just looks at Double D with the most damning look. Destroys the movie theater, hurts Eddie, threatens Double D. These are things friends just don't do. But here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with how Ed is feeling. Anger is a natural human emotion. Psychology even shows that it can work as a distraction from our inner suffering. Now, I'd be lying to you if I said I never got angry and did or said something that maybe was uncalled for. You can tell that because we never really see Ed angry, he has a hard time navigating his emotions, which may be causing him to make these poor choices. However, anger doesn't give us an excuse to hurt the ones closest to us, especially if they're only trying to help. Now, I will say this, he gets a pass for what he did to Kevin.
Home run!
Eddie and Double D head back to Ed's house to see how they can cheer him up. They gather up all the things that usually make him happy, such as comic books, toys, and even pudding skin. But all of them fail horribly. Now some more than others. And some are just downright pathetic.
Finish him. Flawless victory. Fatality.
But none of them fail as badly as this one. Eddie is convinced by Double D to dress up as a chicken because Ed really loves chickens.
Look at me, I'm a chicken. Cluck, cluck, cluck. You love chickens. Chickens make you happy.
You forgot to wiggle your tail feathers, Eddie.
That's it!
After constant abuse, Eddie retaliates at Ed, and he is then consumed by the very same emotion.
With your bad mood, crack a smile, bust a gut, be happy. Get over it.
Nobody has any idea what they've gotten into, and it honestly looks like it's gonna be the end for everyone. Johnny magically appears and is somewhat attracted to the mayhem. His buddy Plank then falls into the crosshairs. Things are looking chippy for Plank, but with his supernatural wisdom, gives Johnny an idea that will calm Ed down.
Oh, this ought to be good.
Now before I reveal the ending, you might be thinking that this side of Ed has never been seen before, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. In the previous season's episode named The Day That Ed Stood Still, Ed wishes to be a monster, like how you would see in an Alien or Godzilla movie. Eddie and Double D grant his wish with the idea of it attracting customers. Over time, like how Ed would be consumed by anger, role-playing as a monster would consume him to the point where he confuses fiction with reality. This confusion causes him to become Edzilla, and he goes on an absolute rampage. Now you can argue that this example of Ed isn't so much him getting angry, it's more so him just getting a little carried away. But I'm mentioning this here because when Ed feels something strongly, whether good or bad, the cul-de-sac feels it, and they often feel it for the worst. What's ironic is that both episodes end in the same nature. Sarah takes off Ed's mask, which makes him return to his normal self. The only difference with Little Blue Ed is that it ends like this. Yes. A pebble is the reason for why we got one of the most destructive sides of Ed that we've ever seen. Now I could go on about how disappointing this ending was and question if it justified the side of Ed that we saw here, but I'm not. I actually see a lot of comparisons to the sides of Ed that we've seen with another extremely popular character. Ed in many ways is a lot like Shrek. Now hear me out for a sec. Looking past the obvious things like they both have green and they both stink, both are misunderstood greatly because of the perception they give off, which might cause you to overlook their other traits. Once you decide to give them a chance though, they're as multi-layered as it gets. They are both great problem solvers in times of danger, both get angry depending on the situation, and both have a more sophisticated side to them. But even though I just compared Ed to an ogre, Ed is like any other person. He gets angry, sad. There are times where he's feeling himself, and he even has moments where he shows his intelligence. Just like anyone else, there is no one thing that makes Ed who he is. He's a person that is experiencing life, and maneuvering it is hard. But that doesn't mean you can't learn and grow from these experiences. Depending on the circumstance, life may bring out a different side to you that you didn't realize you had. So the next time you see someone that seems simple on the surface, take another look, because just like Ed, people will always have other sides to them that you never expected.